In this comparative study, I'll be exploring Marxist film theory comparing Brazil and Snowpiercer through the topic of how capitalism and class struggle is depicted in films from different cultural contexts. Brazil is a dystopian science fiction film by Terry Gilliam which follows Sam, a low-level bureaucrat who pursues Jill, an unknown woman he heroically saves in his dreams, though both he and Jill become wanted for terrorism in real life. The world of Brazil is a capitalist system that appears colorful and vibrant from the outside yet is filled with capitalism-bred inequality and corruption. Snowpiercer is a film by Bong Joon-ho based on a French dystopian graphic novel. It is set in a post-apocalyptic dystopia where the survivors of a climate disaster ride on a train traveling around the world. The train is divided into classes where the lower class is at the back of the train and the upper class at the front. The film follows the protagonist Curtis, who leads an uprising. These films are worthy of comparison as they both depict a Marxist critique of capitalism in two different contexts. Brazil criticizing the rise of consumerism, cultural homogeneity, and the Reagan and Thatcher neoliberal capitalist ideologies of the 80s, and Snowpiercer criticizing the current proliferation of eco-nihilism, class division, and wealth inequality in both South Korea and the US in the 2010s. This analysis will be divided into the Marxist concepts of class struggle, false consciousness, cost of revolution, Carnivalesque, and the spectacle. The bourgeoisie will always try to prevent the proletariat from moving up the economic ladder in a capitalist society. Marx states that a capitalist society is divided into social hierarchy, the lower class proletariat and the upper class bourgeoisie. Society is structured by a base and a superstructure. The base is the production and workers, and their position is sustained by the superstructure, involving laws, media, and culture, which is controlled by the bourgeoisie, thus preventing the proletariat from escaping the system. Both films use cinematography to highlight the oppression of the proletariat. In Brazil, Sam, the main character, a low-level bureaucrat who is wanted for terrorism, attempts to escape gunmen by running downstairs. It is a clear visual allusion to Battleship Potemkin, the dramatized historical recount of the 1905 mutiny made in 1925 by Russian Marxist author Sergei Eisenstein when the proletariat are chased down by the stairs by the armed military force. The stairs create visual hierarchy reflecting social hierarchy as he's descending literal stairs while symbolically descending social hierarchy from the high position of the government to the oppressed proletariat. Additionally, when Sam is lost in the office, the liminal space emphasized by wide shots featuring never-ending corridors depicts the alienation of workers. It creates a sense of overwhelming agoraphobia in an infinite open space to reflect how it is impossible to escape the world of Brazil. This building tension is interrupted by a low-angle tracking shot of the boss, followed by several desperate workers at a rapid pace, which establishes that the upper class has the power within the system. Similarly, Snowpiercer creates visual hierarchy of the train's division into social classes. Moments before the axe massacre of the proletariat, there is an extreme low-angle shot of a high-ranking bourgeoise. Again, this reflects the social hierarchy as she's the one with the power in the scene, watching suffering as entertainment. Once the massacre begins, the audience is forced into the point of view of the bourgeoisie. Bong suggests that we are not simply spectators. We, the privileged, derive our consumerist pleasures from the suffering of others. This further connects to the 2010s alienation of the consumer from the supply chain that provides pleasure, for example, clothing unknowingly bought from sweatshops in Bangladesh. Class consciousness sparks revolution. Marx referred to false consciousness as being falsely aware of one's social class and misperceiving one's true position in society. For proletariats, it is the false understanding of their exploitation and inability to recognize their oppression. For the bourgeoisie, it is the ignorance towards the exploitation of the proletariat. Though one's class consciousness, or the awareness of one's class, is achieved, revolution will occur. Both films reflect this evolution of consciousness. Brazil follows the evolution of Sam from being falsely conscious of his exploitative role in society to conscious. In the beginning, as he's having an absurd bourgeois dinner, a bomb goes off. The steady shots and framing contrast to the chaotic sound effects and the classical music. The bourgeoisie are in their own world, framed with chaos behind them, yet they choose to ignore it or be falsely conscious, and mask it with commodities such as classical music and food. At first, Sam is a part of this ignorant group, where terrorism is only viewed as a minor inconvenience. Gilliam reflects how in the 80s, the bourgeoisie were decreasingly impacted by global issues such as the recession due to high disparities. They have the choice to be falsely conscious. Though during Sam's internal revolution when he becomes conscious, there is another bombing, though this time he reacts. The pacing of the editing is rapid, and the camera movements are dynamic, as he is conscious of his surroundings. Snowpiercer tackles class consciousness through a different lens. The film starts with class consciousness catalyzing revolution. They are aware of their position, though as they move through the train and the mise-en-scène grows increasingly luxurious, Curtis grows angrier as he becomes conscious of the unequal distribution of resources, which is also a reflection of Bong's view of the 2012 context where wealth inequality reached its peak. Though it is revealed that his class consciousness was surface level, the uprising had been instrumentalized as entertainment for the bourgeoisie. He was naive and failed to acknowledge the fact that in revolution, they still lose due to the mass murder of the proletariat. Is the cost of revolution worth it? Marx states that the exploitation of the proletariat and class struggle would eventually lead to revolution or a violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie. Both films end in tragedy, lacking catharsis to suggest that there is no escape in capitalism. When Jill and Sam are finally together, Gilliam suggests that the only way to freedom is death, as she has faked her death in order to be free.
I've killed you.
Furthermore, during the Kafkaesque intellectual montage featuring rapid absurd imagery like the coffin filled with jelly, the black hole juxtaposed with him staring into blankness, it reflects the true reality of capitalism. The only escape is death, or insanity. In other words, it's either no consciousness or false consciousness. The use of this montage places the audience in the state of confusion and the insanity that Sam is in, as one can no longer distinguish what is real and what is not. Gilliam denies the audience of a happy ending, common in 80s cinema, which forces them to acknowledge that this neoliberal system driven by Thatcher and Reagan doesn't have a happy ending for the working class. Similarly, in Snowpiercer, the film ends with the tragedy of death. Everyone dies after revolution because the structure of society is lost when they no longer have preordained roles. Contrary to Brazil, there is an optimistic and pessimistic interpretation of this ambiguous ending as the two youths survive. The polar bear may eat them, or it may be a sign that there is a source of life. Though this poses the question, is revolution worth it when everyone suffers? This was left open-ended to appease the American audience who are used to happy endings, though it reflects the reality of climate change. Although the poor are still the ones suffering most from climate change in 2012, eventually social class will cease to matter as we all die. The exploitation of the proletariat by the bourgeoisie will inevitably result in a carnivalesque uprising. Carnivalesque is a style that subverts the atmosphere through humor and chaos similar to an actual carnival. It involves collectivity, the free interaction between people despite their social hierarchical barriers. It is when unacceptable behavior becomes acceptable and everyone is stripped down to pure human nature. It incorporates the elements of carnival such as loss of individuality and music. Both films utilize masks as a carnivalesque element during the proletariat's uprising. The omnipresence of masks of the bourgeoisie is used to conceal their identity and represent a higher power. They do things illegally and wear masks to hide this, to gain a sense of anonymity and collectivity. In Brazil, the doctor uses a mask to conceal his identity. It's almost a way of justifying his actions, hiding behind his role in society of sustaining order. In Snowpiercer, the mask of the school children is Bong's critique of children being masked from the reality of climate change. The poor are disproportionately impacted while the upper class represented and the children ignore it and hide from it despite being responsible. Additionally, the juxtaposition of the children and the meat in the shot before utilizing graphic match compares the two. Children are simply tools of oppression, and they are indoctrinated with beliefs masked from reality, preventing change within the system. In a capitalist-driven society, everything that was directly lived has moved away into representation due to an obsession with commodities and image. This is an extension of Marxism by Guy Debord, which reduces reality into commodifiable representation. The lack of criticism of the superstructure and the obsession with commodities has led to alienation, cultural homogenization, and the manipulation of mass media. Life is no longer about living, but about having. Both films highlight the absurdity of the bourgeoisie. Throughout Brazil, the absurd mise-en-scène combined with the wide lens creates a distorted reality. For example, plastic surgery, the constant use of mirrors to reflect the two sides of characters, image and reality. Even the food and costume design is humorous and unhinged. Gilliam critiques how capitalism causes societies to become obsessed purely with image and representation. This also connects to the context of the 80s, which was seen as a time of cultural transition and a messy merging of global culture due to the increased globalization of consumerism and spread of ideologies through global mass media. Likewise, in Snowpiercer, the mise-en-scène goes increasingly absurd as the train progresses into the bourgeoisie. This yellow massacre scene is ironic, as the yellow lighting, which normally symbolizes warmth and joy, is contrasted with death. This highlights the deceit associated with capitalism and image. Both films attempt to critique the falseness of the American dream-driven society. Gilliam does this through the stereotypical depiction of the picket fence house where Sam is trapped, symbolically suggesting that he's trapped in the hollow American dream. The American dream image was distorted under the Reagan government, turning it into an object of desire, contrasting to the unequal reality Americans were living in. This also connects to the story of Sisyphus, who's forced to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. He's happy as he is aware of the absurd meaninglessness of the activity. He accepts his fate and therefore finds enjoyment. This suggests that the bourgeoisie will continue to exploit the proletariat as there is no escape, though one must accept their fate and their position in society to become happy. In Snowpiercer, there is symbolism in the smoking of the final cigarette. It is placed in the foreground and at times becoming the focal point to emphasize its importance. It is a symbol of normality before the dystopia. Although it kills you, it is praised and desired and becomes a commodity to be bought and sold due to the representation of everything that was once lived. Both directors forced the audience to reflect on their own position within the system. Gilliam was clearly influenced by other capitalist critiques like Kafka, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and Chaplin's Modern Times, whilst Bong makes reference to Brazil through the character named after Gilliam, the mise-en-scène, and the themes. To conclude, being published 20 years apart, they took two diverse yet successful approaches in depicting class struggle and the failures of the globally dominating capitalist system.